but also she was really not doing anything by then at all, much anything, you know.
Right.
And she was mainly anecdotes many years ago.
Oh, I know, she's just too much. But you know who else was there after my senior year, she left. And I think she retired, and then the person that was there was Glenn Mack, who was
No,
also.
wait, where was she teaching?
Sarah Lawrence. So my senior year, Glenn came in, and he was also amazing. Do you know Glenn Mack?
No, no.
Also another great guy.
And how did,
Such a good time.
well,
Yeah.
let's go around. I would like want to ask a question
Yeah.
about that. About Ruth.
Andre Kribu at Ohio University, where I am now, in Athens, Ohio, the land that time forgot.
Yeah, the last time I was there, we did Education of the Girl Child, and there were 3,000 people in the audience, and there were about 100 at the end of the piece. I mean, the door was That was many years ago.
I went there from Manhattan, and it was an interesting, I drove there when I was as a visiting artist a number of years ago, and then they offered me the position to stay, so it was fascinating. I'd never lived in a small town before in my life, let alone in the Midwest.
He's bought a gravesite already. Here I lie. There were 3,000 before me, and now there's only 100 left.
But Andre's got this traveling gig, so he's only at work half the time.
Right.
No.
It's true.
He and Mark Hunt do this Goldberg Variations. Have you seen it?
No.
It is
No.
awesome.
Oh my
You
gosh.
have to see it.
Oh.
It is fantastic.
We do it in New York again. It's really something. I mean, Mark's done an amazing thing. He did the solo to the Goldberg Variations,
It's
and we
amazing.
do everything with repeats, and
Wow.
it's just us.
And he plays them all.
Yeah, we do well almost
Yeah.
all
Well,
repeats.
sometimes they swap and Andre does the dance.
It gets ugly for a
Did you ever
moment.
see Steve Paxton?
I did, and
Oh,
that-
boy,
that
that's
blew my
that's one of the most beautiful
And
things.
it's funny because I've been working with Chris Aiken the
Oh.
last couple, and he's been talking about that. And so we've been
Oh,
talking about,
that was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
and yeah, I never saw
Oh,
him do that.
so
but-
beautiful, totally different, I'm sure a very different kind of feel, because it's like improvised, so it's a
Right.
sort of feeling about a man alone in the studio, and then sort of the creative impulse coming up, you feel that with him. So modest and exquisitely beautiful piece.
Well, he's mentored Aiken. Aiken's talked about, you guys should get together and see what that would be like.
Yeah.
For Steve to do it in a live situation with live pianos, and see
Yeah.
what that would
Yeah.
feel like. So
Yeah.
that's something that
That's
that's interesting to
interesting.
Or
do.
go back and forth, like
Yeah.
one variation Steve, one variation Mark.
No, that would, but if you get a chance, I mean, because Mark's done an extraordinary job. I mean,
Oh,
just
yeah.
born of
It's-
intelligence and humility.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
something
yeah.
to see.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. Yeah, because dancing to Bach, you have to have quite a bit of humility, like standing still is about as much as
Yeah, he does that.
No, and
He does that.
I is, what can you do?
I'm Peter Jones, I'm a composer and I'm musical director at 5 colleges in Western Mass. Yeah.
You know Wendy Woodson?
Very well, yeah. I saw that show you did, when was it? A long time ago.
Yeah, Plateau series.
I think she had just come there.
We have an interloper.
Hi,
I'm the interloper.
She's a good
I'm not a
actress.
musician, I'm pianist fac, and a teacher on the dance faculty.
Teaches aesthetics and criticism among other things, but she's a fantastic spirit. My
I'm a
best friend,
fantastic
so I invited her.
No,
Thank you for letting me be here.
We don't often let dancers.
The infiltrating purity of music.
We keep the purity as much as we can.
Who has the restroom
That's
key?
what happens.
It's up there by
I have one.
Okay,
Oh,
excellent.
and Andre.
You know, the easiest place to go to the restroom is to go upstairs into the lobby and take their own.
Yeah.
This is the lobby restroom key.
I think
No,
it might
the
be.
lobby's open.
Lobby's
The
open.
locker lobby's open.
That,
I'm
Gee,
so glad we're
This
capturing this
year-
moment on videotape as
Well, he was here
Who added
He was here for 5 minutes, so you know, that's a long time for him to be here.
he's got
Yeah,
a attention deficit.
yeah, well, understand.
There's new medications for that.
It's difficult when you've achieved goddess status.
Okay.
I call him the goddess of what?
Mixing
Mixing
things
it
up.
up.
Mixed
genres.
Mixed
genders.
Mixed
genders.
Let's get it straight, mixed genders, okay, let's go on.
Let's get Tigger on here.
My name is Tigger Benford. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm the music director at can tell you he's the Musical Soul Based Dance Festival as well.
Oh,
This is
great.
Natalie is at ADF.
Oh, cool.
And, yeah, so I'm a percussionist. And my wife is Martha Partridge, who,
And a love
Yeah.
also of.
and we also collaborate, we do a lot of body percussion work.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, that was just wonderful. Ham bone.
Yeah.
Extremely complex.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine, I can't even imagine. Maybe I can't
We watched
imagine.
Quadrobox last
Oh,
night,
boy.
girl.
What are they
How long
doing?
did you take to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many years did you work on that?
So,
Great to hear.
Natalie Gilbert, you know who I am, I'm here and I'm at ADF and you're my hero.
You're my hero.
No, you've been an inspiration. I mean, from the get-go, emotionally and every other way, so I love you, okay?
Oh, I already went.
That's right.
We started
Everybody went.
That's
Okay,
right.
here's
Everybody
another
went.
interloper,
Done.
but introduce yourself, Ed.
Ed Luna, I'm local yokel.
Ed's a performance artist extraordinaire. One of our students here at OSU, and kind of goes in the cracks and.
Yeah, we like those people. Between the cracks.
Could we go to that? I'm really wanting
Yeah,
to
let's
ask
go back.
about, more about,
Okay.
yeah, okay, we all got questions.
Hang in there.
So what did you get from Ruth and your, like, talk to us about the history stuff,
Okay, well, at Sarah Lawrence, I designed my own program as a combined performing arts program because I wanted to be in music and dance program. So I was in the dance department, but I was also in the voice department.
When was this?
Do I have to say?
Right, we're all
Early
old
sixties,
farts.
early sixties.
Okay, good.
But, so I think that when I first came into Sarah Lawrence, I think Bessie, who was at that time the director of theater and dance departments,
Mhm.
I think she could kind of tell that that I did have these, kind of multi-interests and that, and that school really does allow you to design your own program. So my last year, I had 2/3 performing arts and 1/3 academic, which was one French class. And, which I would hide behind the bushes when the teacher came by, but anyway, so that was, so in terms of the dance department, the musical part of that was, Ruth was, taught a music for dance class, which was, and then I think there was I don't know if it was both or whether that was part of the same. There was also a music history class too within that. I'm not sure if that was all part of music for dance. Some of the things, and then there was also rhythmic studies, which, my early training was in Dalcroze rhythmics. That was as a young child,
Oh.
3 years old.
Mhm.
I worked with the Rom sisters at Steinway Hall in New York City.
How long did you do that? Wow.
From 3 to 7.
Oh, wow, well.
And
Wow.
part of that
Really
was,
young, wow.
I was, I have an eye, I can't see out of both eyes at the same time, I can't fuse an image, so I probably a little, coordination problem. I'm not sure if it was right, left, but it was just a coordination problem, and I was already I'm like 4th generation singer in my family. So my mother was a professional singer on radio, she was doing Muriel Cigar commercial, and, Blue Bonnet Margarine, and, Robert Hall, Royal Pudding, she was a professional singer, and also, The Big Show, and, some of, singing radio, so.
I would never guess that influence in your work.
DUZ does everything, DUZ does everything she was doing every day. And my grandfather had been a bass baritone who had a music conservatory in New York, who had come from Russia, and then his father had been a cantor, so, that was really part of the family. So music was something that I always had right from the beginning, and my mother said that I sang melodies back right away as a very, very young child, and I think I had a strong rhythmic sense. So I think from her point of view, because I had a physical coordination problem, I don't know how she found out about Dalcroze, but it was the right thing, because it was really like, for me, it was learning movement through music, whereas I think for the other little girls and boys that were doing Dalcroze, they were learning music through movement.
Mhm.
I was going the other way, I was learning movement through music.
Mhm.
And there were some people that, ended up being professional dancers, like Jane Kosminski was in my class. She ended up in the Taylor Company. And Liz Keane was not in my class, but she was also studying with them. Nancy Kopf There were people that, you know, went into dance. But for me, that was, you know, just opened up the door to existence and joy, you know, as a child. And there was a lot of improvisation, music and rhythms, you know, and complicated rhythmic improvisations. And I just took to it really naturally, and it was something that liberated me, you know, as a young child. So I'm always grateful for that, and I didn't realize until I wrote Atlas, you know, an opera for Houston Grand Opera, and I didn't have to, but I mean, some of the people in my cast were classical singers that came from the Western European tradition, and realizing that rhythmically, and I would do these things that you know, to me, it was very natural. It's right in the body, these big cycles, and then being able to really stretch and compress time, but then come back around to the one and know where the one was. And they were like, how are you getting there? You know, how are you finding it? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I just feel it. And then they said, oh, that's because you come from Dalcroze. And I was like, maybe it is. I never even thought about it over the years, you know, how influential that thing of also the body, the voice, music, and the body are so intricately woven together that there's not a separation for me, and there never was. So I don't think that everybody always thinks that in a way. And yet, I mean, you know, when Merce and John came along and the two things are independent, it still doesn't mean to say that there's not an independence. It doesn't have to be that there's a dependence. But I think that actually when you come from a rhythmic background, you can actually be more independent. I mean, you know, I can really work against music. You know, it doesn't have to be that I'm always with music, but there's some kind of sense that you get about how those things. There's still a relatedness. So.
So then when you got to Ruth.
So when I got to Ruth, she, you know, as I said to Natalie, she just went, you know, because I think anybody in that department that was a musician, I mean, they sort of saw who I was, and so I remember even being in the pit with her playing four-hand piano, and then running backstage and getting to the next costume to be on stage, you know, as a dancer. So, you know.
So you're a pianist as well?
Yeah, I mean, I studied piano. I wouldn't call myself a pianist, but, you know, I mean, I play. And I play my own music a lot, accompanying myself.
Didn't you also talk about how you sort of developed what you do by sitting at the piano and playing and just singing, making up things? That's how you trained yourself, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, so then, you know, shall I just go back a little further?
Yeah.
So also during the time that I was a young person, like 13 or 14, I started playing guitar and singing. I wanted to do, you know, folk music. I responded very strongly to that. And I earned part of my way through school singing at children's birthday parties with a guitar. And so, I just think that plaintive, you know, essentialized kind of singing form that folk music has was something that was really important to me. And I was also in the voice department, so I was in opera workshop at, you know, in Sarah Lawrence. I was being coached and studying and everything, singing leader. And, you know, for my own temperamental reasons, I think, you know, the reasons of temperament in that, I think that I always really I had some kind of sense of always wanting to create rather than be an interpretive artist. For one reason or another, I have no idea why, but I mean, I think I always had that sense. And so doing the leader and, you know, doing the opera workshop, I knew that wasn't going to be my path. And yet one of the really important experiences for me was opera workshop, seeing how Bessie staged opera, because the opera workshop at Sarah Lawrence at that time, the voice part of it was taught by Paul Yukina. Does anybody know who he was? A bass baritone with the City Opera at that time, wonderful man. And Bessie did the more staging part of it. So they worked hand in hand in this opera workshop, and that was a revelation to me as well, because I was trying to do pieces at that time that combined singing and movement, and also in counterpoint and, you know, kind of complicated. But I wasn't, you know, I didn't, you know, just was doing little studies and, you know, just the very beginnings of that. And so somehow seeing how those things wove together was seeing how Bessie staged was something that was very important to me. And then, you know, with Ruth, Ruth was another kind of, the rhythmic studies, for example, I just love. I was, again, like a duck in water. I mean, I was like the happiest person in the world in rhythmic studies. A lot of people weren't, but I just loved it. I mean, I just completely loved it. And I still feel that's in my body. I mean, I still feel that when we sing, the group that I work with now and have worked with all these years is composed of people who really come from both music and singing and has some kind of movement sense. It's definitely a kinetic vocal style. I mean, I feel that I probably wouldn't have gotten to the way that I sing if I hadn't come from a movement background for a lot of different reasons. But with Ruth, she did the rhythmic studies, which I just loved. And then the music for dance, what she did was, had people improvise on the piano. So there were people that had never played piano in their lives. So she would do something like, a lot like what's in her book, like now, you have to use major seconds. That's the whole piece has got to have seconds as an ostinato, or or ostinato as an idea, or, tritones, and so these people who had never played piano in their life were making compositions. And she really got everybody playing. And then there were these, sometimes there were these music history, and then there was also analysis. We would listen to music and actually analyze it. And then there was also history, like, there's an assignment that she gave that I never have forgotten to this day, which was, she had us listen to Kyrie Eleison set from everybody from Monteverdi to Stravinsky, Kyrie. So you're really hearing how you can take that same text and set that, so it's kind of opened it's like the world. I mean, it's like I had a lot of music in my background, but it was as if the door to the universe opened up for me. And I just would carry these stacks of records from the music library. I just wanted to hear everything. Plus, I was looking, at that time for composition classes of dance composition, I was looking for music to work with. And I was I had always, even in my piano lessons, I'd been always very interested in 20th century music, or music, Bach and before. I was just I don't know, my ear went particularly to 20th century music. I was playing the Kapelevsky children's pieces, my teacher was giving me those things, the Mikrokosmos and stuff like that. And so I just listened to everything. I mean, that was the first time I heard John Cage's string quartet. I heard the Henry Cowell piano pieces. I did a piece to those, three of those piano pieces. And another thing that I thought was really, really remarkable in that dance department was that they never allowed canned music at all. It was all live. No
Wow.
tape. And I don't know whether that changed. I don't know whether so it was all live, and they would sometimes use students to play, but Ruth played. And so, for example, the Henry Cowell, those three piano pieces, I did, I think it was Alien Harp, Anger Dance, and I didn't do the Banshee because that was too easy. Conversation. Everybody used the Banshee, Conversation, I think was called the first one. No, Advertisement, Alien Harp, and Anger Dance. And I remember at that time was Glenn Mack was there, and I remember us looking at the scores, and I'd only heard those Folkways albums, the album of Henry Cowell playing his own composition, and it didn't look anything. What he played was not exactly what was on the page, which I'm having the same problem with my own music. So, I just remember, this real discipline of. I think Glenn, we sort of split the difference with it, but being, that really the music was live. It was so important. It was live.
I remember Ruth talking about that and saying that it's because in the 30s, of course, they didn't have recorded stuff, and as well, everybody was out of work, and so they got all these composers to come by and do stuff,
right?
Because they were just hanging out too, and so everything from their whole traditions, Ruth and her husband's, work with the early pioneers was all live.
Right.
So she just didn't turn a corner then, obviously.
Right.
That was by the 60s, she was still doing the same thing.
Right. But see, to me, it's funny that you would say that, I didn't never realize that was necessity as the mother of invention, because to me, there was a philosophical thing about it, which to me was I strongly felt very much, in tune with that philosophy, because the thing is, tape never breathes.
Right, the physicality of it.
You can know it very well, but it never breathes.
Yeah.
And, I just think that.
Well, I wondered whether it was a
Yeah.
philosophical thing for her, or whether it was just an extension of what they did,
I don't
because
know.
they were before recording, really, and.
I don't know. I always felt that's what they felt was really important, that was kind of a positive
Yeah,
way of thinking about things.
yeah. I don't know at that time how much choice was there. I mean, were a lot of people in the early 60s ever using a lot of recordings, so,
Some people were, yeah.
yeah. So it was
And
just sort of the starting
I never
point.
had that same feeling. I mean, I had a really, I'm not mentioning names, and I know you actually want to say the school, because then you'll know what the names were, but I was a guest artist at a school in California, and, there was a choreographer who went to the woman who was the head of the music department and said, it was at a party, as a matter of fact, and I had just come in, it was like a party because of my guest residency, and I heard him say, you know, what are your kids playing? I'll do choreography to anything that your kids are playing, right?
Mhm.
And then she said, well, how many days would that be that they would have to play? And he said, 4 performances, and she said, my kids are too busy to do that. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Your kids are too busy to do that?
That's
That's
very
every
common.
I
music-
mean,
that's
I
every
would
music
have
school in the
died
country.
to be able to do 4 performances. I mean, what are you talking about? What are they doing there? They're too busy to perform? You know, get that experience and everything? I just was in shock. I was bad. I was just outraged.
I think
Yeah.
you were good.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't very subtle about it, but
Can I ask
I was
you-
just outraged. I was completely outraged.
Can I ask a question about the, you know,
I feel
everybody
like I'm
doing
wandering, I'm sorry.
it's
No,
fine.
that's what we
Doing
do.
everything
we do
live.
this.
That's what, yeah, we
You're
love to
fitting
track
in.
that.
Yeah.
Doing everything live, was there, I mean, the mid-50s and the 60s were the real birth of the electronic music scene, in a lot of ways, the technology.
Right.
I mean, was there a presence for that?
Not really at that time. I mean, I know that Bessie admired Nick's work very much, but there was, as I don't remember there being an electronic music studio at Sarah Lawrence at that time, so that, you know,
Don't forget,
they're.
that's a little later, that's really mid-60s before you
Yeah.
get
Well,
to
Lucy
studios.
Chevsky was doing this stuff.
No, and
Yeah,
also
yeah.
Nick was doing, I mean, Nick was doing all that work in that. but there
the
wasn't-
studios weren't around
There were
much.
studios, I don't think
Well,
it was.
Columbia had one, but.
Yeah,
that's
but I
about
don't,
it.
you know,
Yeah.
but then that would have been more like tape music at that particular
Mhm.
point, but I mean, there was a lot of percussion work and everything. I mean,
Or
there
even
people were doing a lot of.
John Cage's stuff, where it's, you know, you perform radios and
Yeah.
you cut and splice tape, any of that.
Well, I remember in a piece that I did in my senior year, I didn't do exactly that as a score, but I had things where the actions had sound that was actually part of the environment, you know, that was kind of part of the overall.
Mhm.
So, but I don't remember people doing that particularly as scores.
Well, we're fighting the battle, of course, getting it back in, you know, it's sort of the opposite way around, everything's taped, you know.
Yeah.
And the battle for all of us seems to be the opposite, trying to get live music into the arena, and it's
Yeah,
really hard.
it's a battle, it's a real battle, isn't it?
Yeah, even when the choreographers are fighting on your side, it's still hard.
Yeah,
It's like
even-
with Sean, with the stuff we did with Choice, his management is really trying to book it as with live music. It's very difficult, it costs another $5,000, and,
Yeah.
the presenters don't wanna go for it. It's hard. But, that's the job they're fighting.
Yeah, that's right.
But a lot of that is also, I mean, you find that on the university level, which is what all of us are trying to deal with. I mean, if you can't fix that which has become the grassroots level at this point, it's interesting what you were saying about the musicians. Because whenever I use live musicians, and I'm fortunate to have a very good relationship with the music school. So we say, well, let's do this odd piece, let's use this music. I can go to the conductor and say, well, we wanna do this odd piece, and let's get a chamber orchestra together. So the dance concert begins with the curtain going up and the, conductor, and we're able to manipulate the conductor, and the kids are very confused. But I always have to approach the scheduling saying, we will put you first in the program. You do not have to
You do joint concerts with the chamber orchestra?
Well-
They play alone first?
No, they did it as part of a
I
dance piece,
see.
as part of a duet, and we've got 25 musicians
Oh,
on
that's
stage.
great.
That happened once, and then the next time I brought this up again, you could see on everybody's face, but this is such a pain in the ass.
Right.
When I suggested at one point that we use the orchestra, the director of orchestras at the school said, we'll write a piece for us, we'll build it into our rehearsal schedule, and then you can do that on your dance concerts. And I brought this up to the faculty, and I said, well, I don't, I could write it for a guest artist, but I thought maybe we'll do like a 5-movement suite, that way we could do this whole thing, you all could choreograph to, but we'd have to do it in the other auditorium, because obviously it's going to be a problem with the size of the orchestra. Very excited about this. The issue becomes, but this is such a pain in our ass.
Oh, no, of course, well, my whole work is a pain in everybody's ass. Because, the live musicians is my work.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, that's why I'm still struggling, like,
Yeah.
everyone went to.
And I'm just
So
curious.
you,
And that's
you
it.
find a
So
lot
what
of
has
trouble
been-
too.
Yeah, what has been your history with that over the last 10 years?
Well, 10 years ago, I was doing Houston Grand Opera, and I did, making a 3-hour opera work, but with only 10 only a 10-piece orchestra though.
This far range point, that looked like an extraordinary success in terms of overcoming all these obstacles.
It
And
was
the
at
fact
that
that you were
time.
doing something with Houston Grand Opera was, my God.
Yeah, it
it's
was
amazing.
at that time. I mean, it was like a $500,000 budget.
No.
You know, so that's, you know, it was a big thing, and it was 5
Did
years
you
of
have
work, and
to
it was
convince
5 years
them?
to get over it, and.
5
You know
years to
what
get over it.
I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
We know
I
what
was
you mean.
physically ill from it, and.
Yeah.
Was there
Yeah.
a specific person at Houston Grand Opera
David Copley.
who was behind it? And-
David Copley, yeah.
Yeah, and that.
But also, you know, see, how that happened was that Ben, do you all know who Ben Krywas is from
Right.
Minneapolis?
No.
He used to be part of Minnesota Opera, but now he has, I think it's called Minnesota New Music Theater Ensemble or something like that. There used to be a thing with NEA called Opera in the 80s and Beyond. And Ben was, you know, he was a knight in shining armor for new musical theater forms. And so we did a showcase. He set up this showcase of, I think, 4 or 5 people that were working in musical theater forms. We sang Dolman music. They did something from, I think, Tony Davis was working on X at that time. They did an excerpt. Gospel of Columbus, they did an excerpt. And Bob Ashley, I think there was 4 of us. And David came to that, and so he, you know, just loved Dolman music, so he said, let's do a project, why don't you come down to Houston and teach Dolman music to 6 singers from the Houston Grand Opera studio. So we did. Andrea Goodman and Bobby Ian and I went down there and taught it to them. They sang it. It was rather odd. I gave you know, physical exercises. They were, you know, 300-pound. You know, it was about from 200 to 300-pound people. And, you know, they didn't like the exercises very much. And then they said, "How old are you?" At that time, I was like, I think 42 or something. I said 42. They went, "You're 42. Let's do the exercises." You know, they were like in their 20s. They couldn't walk. I mean, they were like, you know, their bodies were painful. You know, it was very painful to see like young people who were going to be injured just from standing up. I mean, you know, you could see a lot of pain. No, I'm not kidding. I mean, you know, like alignment-wise and everything, very painful. You know, and there is like kind of a sense, there is this kind of weird detachment in that world of like, oh, I love, you know, when I was auditioning for Atlas, I went down there to audition. I heard about 100 people down there. And, you know, and you know, the perception would be, oh, that's a beautiful sound. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, this person cannot walk across the floor. You know, I can't use that person. I just can't use that person. So it was really weird how you know, the sound is detached from the whole thing, you know, which is what I think is the problem with the form, basically, as it exists now, and that's one of the reasons why over the years I felt that I'm trying to work on this new musical theater kind of form, you know, nonverbal musical theater form, which I've been doing for years and years and years and years, you know, in the hopes that, you know, we could come back to some of what early theater had, you know, I mean, ancient theater forms had, some of what happens in non-Western theater forms, you know, where this thing is integrated.
Are you developing a method of training to have?
I've been teaching for many, many years, yeah.
But I mean, an actual methodology that is starting to crystallize for you?
I think it's always crystallized. I mean, I'm not writing it down in a book or something like that, but I feel I'm always trying to invent these ways of combining the voice and the body and space and image, you know, together, so.
Would you write that book?
I have a really hard time codifying what I do. I just can't stand it. I mean, I'm having trouble with scores now because Boozy is now publishing my stuff, and I'm you know, trying to explain that some of the stuff, like to put it on paper, it's just absurd. And like the one that they chose to do, one of them, Pondachant #2, it's like, oh my gosh, it's taken 1.5 years for a 3-page score. But I've tried to explain that particular one, I mean, they chose that one because it's so much fun to listen to and to watch and everything. I mean, I could teach that in half an hour to somebody, but to have that on paper is like, you can't read this thing. You know, it's impossible. It's sort of the same thing that we deal with in dance, you know, how do you transfer this information?
Would they accept the idea of alternative notation?
Well, we did do like a map, and then we have a, you know, note by note kind of score, and then there's a CD that will go with it,
Yeah,
and a video.
CD-ROM, right,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
so they'll do that.
They're gonna try, you know, they've taken me on for better or for worse,
Oh, that's good.
you know, in one way or another, but it's kind of, I have a lot, you know, they had to push for a lot of years for me to say yes, and I'm still like, I don't know if this is the right thing for me.
That's kind of delicious, the idea of you being on Boozy and Hawk's register. I think that's
I
really.
know, but it's like so painful for me,
Yeah.
you know, because when
But
it
don't give up
gets
your
on paper,
principles.
it's so much less complex than what we do.
So don't give up your principles, insist
I'm
that it
trying, but
be-
you can't, it's not, it's just, what you end up having to, sort of sign off on is always gonna be a lot less complex than what we do. You know, like this Panda chant, for chorus, to get them going, you have to have a certain number of people on a part, so it has to be, to me, it's squared off and simplified down, like, you know, percussion wise, you know, because it's a percussion kind of vocal piece. And then when I hear my own ensemble do it, because it's one person on a part, everybody can play in a way, it's so much more sophisticated, but if you have a chorus, you can't do that. They have to do a certain pattern, because then it's just, otherwise it's chaos, so it's I don't know, I'm not
So
liking it.
you can't specify that it can't be for chorus?
Well, I mean, a choral thing does sound great, you know, I mean, it also has its own integrity, so it's kind of, I don't know,
How's the financial thing work for you over the last number of years?
really hard,
Yeah.
really hard.
Talk about that, just what.
Yeah, so anyway, Houston was an unusual situation. Houston
Yeah.
was an unusual situation, and now these years, I mean, for example, you're talking about a chamber orchestra. I did a piece called Politics of Quiet in 1996, and I had, you know, my 10 singers, which was already a lot of people, and I had 2 instrumentalists. So poor Alison Sniffen, who's in this piece that we're doing here, who plays French horn, keyboard, violin, theremin, you know, I mean, you know, she plays a lot of stuff, you know, and then I had, in that piece, I had a keyboard player, she was playing French horn and violin and second keyboard. And now what I'd like to do with that piece is I don't like the way the keyboard sound, I don't like the electronic keyboard with it. I think it should be a small chamber, you know, real little chamber orchestra. I have not been able to raise the money, like to, you know, make that arrangement, you know, to try to play with the instruments and to make it a recording for ECM, for example, where it's, you know, instruments rather than a keyboard. That thing has just been hovering for about the last 5 years. I just can't get it together, like to get an orchestra together. You know, and I need people who will also play a little bit with me, you know, doesn't have to look at, oh, this is a ukulele,
Right there,
play that.
the other row.
So, it's kind of frustrating, and with this piece now with Mercy, again, it's like, well, I have like 5, well, Allison's singing, so there's actually 5 of us singers, 1 actor, Ann Hamilton, and then Allison is playing multi-instruments, and John Hollenbeck is playing multi-instruments. John Hollenbeck's an incredible percussionist, but he also plays keyboard, and he's playing you know, he's playing marimba, he's playing vibes, he's playing, you know, I mean, just everything. So that's how I've solved it, is that, you know, okay, I can usually afford 2 instrumentalists, but they gotta be able to play more than 1 instrument. You know, that's how I've solved it, at least try to get some kind of sense of sonic anything. And then my voices, you know, the voices are my instrumentalists, so, you know, as much as I can. And then they also have to move, and costumes are flying back there, and they're acting, and they're, you know, everybody's doing everything.
So even after having such this enormous budget from the Houston Opera and then moving on to other projects, do you feel like you're, you know, trying to step backwards in terms of the financial back?
Totally, it's so hard. I mean, my office is like, are we gonna be open next week? You know, it's really, really hard. It's really hard.
And do you do a lot of university stuff? What do you do?
Well, we have been touring, and, you know, Irina Shagan is my touring person here in the United States, and, you know, with due respect, I mean, the kind of milieu has been hard for me. I mean, I enjoyed, you know, 2 days ago, we did a concert at Cleveland Museum, and it was a music series, so I felt good about being on a music series. I think, for me, part of my Between the Cracks thing has been that I have a really hard time being in the dance field. Not that, I mean, that's where I come from, that's my family. But my work isn't dance, really. It really isn't dance. And that's really hard for me, because I feel like I've made as much, if not more, of a contribution in music as, you know, than I have in movement, per se. But the thing is, I feel like the classical music world, they won't accept me.
Because?
I feel that, I don't know. I mean, I think that the musicians certainly know what my contribution has been, but they just are because my methods are a little different than the Western musical, European tradition.
You're very
Excuse me
involved.
for saying this, but it's such a boys' world,
Yeah.
this boy world,
And
and I do girl world,
you've
girl world.
always been tonal.
And I've always been tonal,
And
but,
that's by bucking that.
but you know what, another thing that I realized, because I was teaching, Theo was a wonderful singer who's in my ensemble, I was teaching him one of the songs from the Hill because he was doing a concert in Germany, and I was teaching him Walaioa, which is one of the songs from the Hill. He knows my music, he's sung my music for 7 or 8 years now, And he's like, oh yeah, right, great. And so then we start rehearsing, he was like, whoa, this is so complicated. It's so incredibly complicated. But the thing is, it doesn't sound like that. So I think that these guys, they come into this, these critics, they come into my music like, 2 years ago I did, now I'm gonna be like, man, never do it. 2 years ago I did like, Lincoln
Yeah.
Center Festival, I was like the honored composer in that thing. As a composer, it was all 3-piece concerts of music. And I could have done like 10 concerts of music, there's so much music there, but I did 3 concerts of music. So this guy from the Times, he comes in, I mean, he was much more respectful than usual, I must say. I mean, they've been really like brutal, like to me, but it doesn't matter to me that much, but really, it's just been brutal. But he came to the Alice Tully, we were doing some stuff from Atlas, we were doing Facing North, and, standing ovation, I mean, packed and everything. Just his take on the music was like, Nurit Tillis, who's like a great musician, she just had her head in her hands reading this thing. And that was actually respectful, relatively respectful. But if they're still hung up on the vocabulary, it sounds to them like we're improvising. It's like, they go, well, you have to leave your, suspend your disbelief at the door. She wants it to be, this is totally intuitive. I'm going, wait a minute. Now, there is an intuitive aspect of it. There is an intuitive aspect of generating the material, but the structure is like precise. I mean, Theo said he just couldn't believe it. He said, this woman comes into rehearsal and there's one note that she changes and the whole thing shifts. I'm saying that, and I'm not saying I'm so great, but I'm just saying that
it's also
there's a misunderstanding of what they're hearing. They're not even hearing
It's not
the
criticism.
rigor of this work and how, and even singers, like when I taught some of this music to Musica Sacra, and they looked at I had to give them some kind of score because we only had 4 rehearsals. Oh, we can read this down, and then they were like, they tried to do it, and it was like, wait a minute, this is really hard.
I
Because
told
it's
you
very
that-
transparent, everything shows. It's like naked to sing this.
I told you the story this summer, I think, about my freshmen at East Bend, where I gave them the cabaret song from Facing North. And their reaction was, what is this? It's so simple, I can't believe,
Yeah.
and I said, well, write it down, and they couldn't do it.
Right.
But then, the real reward for me was everywhere I went in the halls of Eastman, I heard somebody going, yeah, everywhere I went, they couldn't get it out of their heads either. And at least 20 students at Eastman felt differently about your music after that.
It's very, what you see is not really what you get, actually, I think.
Mhm.
It's elusive.
I wanted to ask a related question. When you won the Scripps Award, and
Yes.
also in the performance of Mercy, definitely, it was also true this summer, you performed some of Facing North. And
Mercy
one of the
we did.
things,
At Mercy, we didn't perform Facing
no,
North.
at the Scripps Award
Oh,
several
yeah.
years
Yeah.
ago,
I
you
remember
performed.
that, yeah.
And one of the things that really comes through in that is the power, and it's a very gentle power, but the power of your personality. What kind of experiences have you had with other people doing your music, and how are you able to convey that same sense of presence that
It's really
is really
it's-
wonderful in your
There's
performance?
an addendum to that, because I remember we were together at that concert, and we walked out, and we actually brought that question up, because it was interesting, because about a couple, halfway through that performance, thinking, it's so interesting that this really feels to be so much about who she is, and right now, in this moment.
Well, I have 2 different ways of dealing with that. One way I have with my ensemble is that I don't try to make people be like me, but I'm basically trying to bring out who they are really strongly.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's always been from the beginning of the ensemble, when Andrea Goodman and Susan Campy and Monica Solon were in the ensemble, and we did Tablet, which is the first piece I did where the vocal parts were equally complicated, because in the old days, I would just sing myself with the organ, and then sometimes people would sing, a little bit here and a little bit there, or some choral things, but basically, Tablet was the first time that I wanted, I needed to have singers that had the same, a lot of skill, and that really, had the same kind of level of complexity. So I chose them for the fact that, number one, each vocal timbre was really different, and that their personalities and their beings were very different. And so my strategy in those terms is to try to work as much as I can to bring out like the individual unique qualities of each of their voices and each of who they are. And related to that is a very good question, because with Atlas, and some of these singers had never worked with a composer that was working really to bring out their particular qualities, and Atlas was really built on those people. So how do you then how is the Met gonna do that? It's not just a baritone, you know, it's Steve Comm. You know, and it's not that, I mean, sometimes we do, and I've learned over the years to not just be in anguish to replace somebody. I mean, for the old days, I would like, it would take me 6 months to get over it. But now I know that, no, I just look at that person, I don't try to make Steve Comm second. No, I look at who is this person and how am I gonna make that person in this piece. So that's how I've dealt with it as far as working, and you'll see how these people, you'll see that we have a really close, generous relationship on stage, and, you know, as I go along with my work, I realize that the real content of the work to me, I started realizing mostly in Atlas, but now if I think back over, because they were new people that I was working with, that came from different discipline than they, you know, the ensemble before Atlas, they grew up with me. I started working with them when they were in their 20s, and my vocabulary became something that was just second nature to them, and the way of thinking about the voice and the way of working together. But with these classically trained people, it was a whole new way of thinking about things. And we just have jokes about, like, you know, no paper in this rehearsal, and then I go, well, Katie, you wanna look at what it looks like? And then she said, no, we don't work with paper. And she got very classical, but, you know, she could read down anything, so, you know, sort of, no cheating. But, I think that, you know, what I've found over the years now, you know, and thinking back, is that I believe that no matter what the content, on the outside content of every work that I do, and I'm thinking more of the more theatrical pieces, you know, the music, it kind of speaks for itself in the concerts and stuff like that, but basically, I think that, well, even in the concerts, I think that the behavior of making music, the behavior of sharing, the behavior of being so alert that somebody's eyelid could just flicker and you know where they are, and that someone's having a hard night and everybody pulls for them. What's going on? You know, and the sort of radiance of people, you know, making music together. That is what the content of the work is. That is what we can offer as artists in this day now, that the technology can never do. So, you know, that has a lot to do with these, you know, bringing each person out really strongly for themselves. So that's on that level. Now, the last few years, last 10 years since Atlas, a lot of these people that had concert careers before they worked with me and have their own distinguished careers have wanted to sing my music, and that's been a very, very challenging and sometimes depressing kind of prospect, because, well, the people that I work with, I can actually, you know, they know the vocabulary, they know the way of doing things, they know the philosophy, but I still work with them really hard to make them understand, you know, how there's this parameter of precision and freedom within this work, particularly solo pieces. How do you make your form as precise as it is, and because it's very precise, and but then still let that level of playfulness that comes out, like when I'm a solo, when I do my own a cappella pieces, I always have the ability at any moment to play with, if I'm inspired and I'm on the branch of the tree and I find something within that, I can stay there for maybe 3 or 4 more phrases and then go back to the trunk, you know. And how do you take that freedom, how do they know that? You know, it's kind of like, how would they know that, not being the creator of that work? So that's been incredibly challenging. And then the other thing is, these people that just either transcribe my stuff from a record, or they, you know, somehow interpret it. And if, you know, like for example, there's a very fine trombone player that just sent me the trombone version of the New York Requiem. I can't believe this. The trombone version of the New York Requiem and the trombone version of the 2 Volcano Songs duets.
Oh my God.
So the thing, and you know, and he wants to, you know, he recorded it, and so you know, like, okay, I'll take it. I'm trying to also be generous, so I sent him this ersatz score that I have of New York Requiem. But I said, you know, this is only a transcription of one of Tom Bogdan's performances of it, and here's my CD of it, and let's talk about it. But what I realize is that, and he's a really good player. He plays with the Empire Brass Quintet.
Mm-hmm.
Such a good player. When he sent me the thing, I was almost in tears, because I thought all he needed to do was come up to New York one time with me, you know, because he plays well, and it's almost good enough, but there's so much freedom that he could have taken that he didn't take. And Tom's not coming from coming more from a classical background. His rhythmic thing is a little square for my taste. For him it works, for Tom it's fine, but it's like, you know, and so I just listened to this and I go, all he would have had to do was get on the plane and work while I'm still alive, work with me one time, he would have had it because it's so,
So is he gonna do that?
well, I have to call him up, but I mean, then he'd have to re-record and everything, I mean, it's like really, but I really feel now I'm starting to see that even someone who's a really good player, it's like, you know, they've gotta come and get the information from the horse's mouth, that this paper just does not make it at all.
But
And I'm sure you people have the same thing, because you're playing, a lot of, at least what Ruth played, she didn't have on paper. She was playing, isn't it? Isn't that what you?
Well, but I mean,
True.
that's
Making
really
music.
why you belong in the dance world,
Yeah.
because your work is ephemeral.
I know,
And it's the ephemeralness of it
I
that's so
know,
powerful.
I know, it's so
And-
sad.
And the music world
I'm
is
dealing with my
not-
mortality.
No, it's not ephemeral, it's definitely put on the page and, you know, everybody's
Yeah.
gonna sound the same,
I know.
the same doing.
I know, it's a
it.
physical teaching, it's like the oral tradition or something like that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but boy, does the
Which is
music world
also-
need that.
But it's why
I
they're
think.
afraid of it
I-
too.
yeah,
I mean,
sure,
they're
but-
very
Do,
afraid of that.
do jazz musicians come to it with a different?
Well, Theo is a jazz musician, for example, but then with YOO, it was really, it just blew his mind. And I'm telling you, he can imitate everything I've ever done, so he could be Meredith Monk II. He's such a mimic kind of, you know, he's just got that kind of an ear. He was just like, you know, as we got deeper into it, his mind was blown. You know, so but I mean, I think that the jazz mentality, like for the New York Requiem, someone who would have, well, I think that this trombone player had that, but he got stuck with also the paper a little bit.
But I think we've all been approached on one level or another to make CDs for classes and I mean, I don't know how many times I had to try and explain to someone, losing hospital, one of them, that, you know, it existed for that moment,
Mhm.
for that piece in time, and if we cut it out and we make this one, and we put it over here and, you know, 90 people are gonna use it, and it's not gonna be very good. Because the reason
It's
those
frozen or
sounds
something,
came
right?
out was because of the people in the room, the teacher, the space, and was it a wonderful thing? Yeah, well, maybe at that moment, but it's not meant to be.
But then how do you share, like,
Redone.
it's a lot of fun to sing the Ponda chant. How do you share, I mean, it's so much fun to do it, it's so singable, you know, so then how do you share? You know, how do you have a generous spirit, because, you know, Tom Bogdan, my dear man, who's like in my ensemble, he was the first one, he wanted to sing Gotham Lullaby, and I made the Requiem for him. And he said, girl, you've just got to also be generous, we wanna sing this
But
stuff.
see, this is what
So how do you
dancers
do that?
have been, I mean, that's where technology may be able to help, because like what we're doing here at OSU with CD-ROMs, like with Phoebe Miller and with Vicki Uris, we're using video, we're using interviews, we're using rehearsal situations, we're using you talking, and that can all be accessed on one program. You pull it up on the computer and you have all these experiences, plus the paper, plus the notation, plus
I would love to do, you know,
Well,
one
let's
of
get
those
a grant
sometime.
and do it for you.
I think
I
the
was
thing
gonna say
is
for
that
my work, that would
every
be
time you have a
interesting.
rehearsal, every time you have somebody that comes up and says, well, we really wanna do that, you digital videotape, I mean, it's something where there's, and it's there, and there's access to that in some respect, so it doesn't become one of those, well, we understand there might be a letter from Clara Schumann actually describing what her letter, you know, but I always think of Woody Allen's great line, which is, I don't wanna achieve immortality through my work, I wanna achieve immortality by not dying.
Well, your stuff certainly works on CD, I mean, without
Yeah.
the personal contact, without the visual movement elements.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh,
But you know, it
And
has the power, well, this is so personal, because I've seen it, and I bring that memory when I hear it again, and I've tried playing it for my students, and they have this kind of reaction of, oh, but we were talking about this yesterday, you know, we want our students to have the same passion about what we're doing that we have, and they don't. And how do we beat this into them in some way? And
Listen to this.
And playing one of your things, it's like, you know,
Listen to
you should love this person, she is the most amazing, and they start looking going, and.
But
Yeah,
a
but
lot
that's
of
not-
young
They haven't
people,
had the
unique
but a lot of
to
young, but a
No,
lot
well,
of,
it's true.
but a lot of young people are using my music to make dances too, though.
Very drawn to
Yeah.
it, they know.
You know, I think the dancers, the young dancers sometimes have a relationship to it more than.
Because they're gonna be, you know, I mean, this thing you talk about with contemporary classical world composition, because I know I hang out with these guys in the Music Factory Records, and they're nice people, but they're just so in love with overt complexity.
Yes, intellectual complexity,
And
exactly.
strongly, amazingly intellectualized way of
That's
looking at
right,
things, and
that's
sort of
right.
has the voice
And that's
for
an
the
academic
emotional.
poison.
Well, that's the voice in the, that's
And so your
that
work
mind
is-
and the body, that's the Western European split.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
You
yeah,
know,
I
that's,
have
that's so
this-
true, complexity for its own sake, right?
Right, and your work, I have the slightest doubt in the world is as precise and complex as you describe it, it's like, yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying, but the, you know, the overt
The
surface
surface.
is extremely simple and transparent. which
It's
is
not just
one of
not,
the things I just most
Well,
admire
that's a
about it.
choice too,
Most,
you know?
most admire about it.
You know,
so.
it's a choice.
but
I
it's
think.
not just that it's not complex or seemingly complex, it also is that it calls it into question. And I think you might get more of your,
Calls it.
you know, you
Which is
probably
that?
get
Which is
more that
Calls
the
into-
presence of your music comes across as accessible and simple and reaching for something really deep
Right.
within it. But I think it not only is not like that complexity, but it calls it into question.
Oh, calls that complexity into
Challenge.
question.
Yeah, and I think that might be where you get more,
That's interesting.
you know, I think you're much more simpatico with the dance side of things for these same reasons than you are with the academic music side of it.
Well, I've been commissioned to write my first full orchestra piece for Michael.
You told me that, yeah.
That's
So,
great.
um, Michael sort of understands. You know, he definitely understands what I'm trying for. But even in those terms, I think that maybe for, I don't know, we'll just have to see how
You
this
doing for
goes.
San Francisco or for the new,
For
or for
New
the one
World,
down
New
New World?
World.
Yeah, that's
Well, you
great.
conduct
Yeah,
it.
that's fantastic.
No,
You
he'll
conduct
conduct it, Michael.
Are you gonna sing them instrumentals, their parts?
You know, I did, what the project is about is trying to work, you know, his idea was to try to work with instrumentalists the way that I would work with singers. And so I've gone now already for one workshop down there, and I brought down some material from this night piece that I wanted to, you know, I've been wanting to do with chamber orchestra, but I think that he would really like it to be that I write something particularly for this group of people, but using that as material, we workshopped that, and we had a really good time. I had like 22 pieces for 2 days, and then we did the full orchestra, the 90, played some stuff.
How are you?
It was so many, it was really fun. I mean, it was, you know, it was an incredible opportunity for him to also take me through the colors of the orchestra. I mean, I've been working on with a few years with Kirk, orchestration lessons with him. I mean, just to write pieces for these instruments and to actually, part of it has been to open up my heart to the orchestra as a medium, because I'm not that interested, actually. You know, the Western European orchestra just doesn't turn me on a certain level. So, but now, you know, just to get rid of my prejudice, is what it is. But, oh, we had a lot of fun. It was really fun. I mean, I'm scared a little bit, because I've got to go back to the drawing board now and start from scratch. But,
How do the kids respond?
oh,
Because,
they
I mean,
were
see,
great.
now that strikes me as something that would be new, because 15 years ago, I can't imagine going down and working with conservatory training.
Well, New World is different, though. That's why he
Yeah.
wanted me to do it for them. And then the idea is that after these workshops, you know, we put it into score form, and then maybe San Francisco could play it, but to make the piece with these kids. And they were showing me all, you know, they showed me, you know, every extended technique they could think of, and, I mean, it was, there. And now I can do this, and I can do multiphonics, they were so excited.
So great.
And I
So
actually
great.
got a letter from the, you know, I've never been a flute fan, and I told, the flute player, you know, Alicia, you know, she said, I'm so glad that now you know that flute is a kick-ass instrument. And she sent me a CD of like all the extended flute pieces that she had, you know, and with the scores. And she showed me all this stuff, and she, you know, she said it was such a wonderful experience to do that those few days. The kids really had a good time.
That's great.
But Michael was also amazing. I mean, he was like a guide to the orchestra. And, you know, we voiced these, you know, as I say, I brought material in, and the way that I dealt with it is that I had the material on paper, but I had it more that every single instrument in the orchestra had the same information, but, you know, transposed. But it wasn't like, oh, you flutes are playing this, you're doing that. Everybody had everything. So we could say, okay, violas, you take the top line, and cellos take the middle, and violins take the bottom, or turn it over, or we could try anybody doing anything. So it was sort of that idea of hearing the different colors, and then we taped it. So, and then I've been studying it and everything, I mean,
What
it's
an
been
opportunity that was,
an
a lot of fun.
incredible
Wow.
opportunity, I mean,
To
I'm
play
so
with the
grateful.
monsters.
I'm so grateful, I mean, I don't know anyone else who's had the opportunities.
No,
you
he's
know.
first class, I mean.
Oh,
he
he's
really is
amazing, Michael's amazing, but I'm still tossing and turning about it, you know, who it'll end up being, I have no idea, it's just, and I've tried to think about doing it not with voices, I mean, I could have voices, but I'm thinking really, let's keep on thinking about the instruments as voices, let's keep on thinking of the instruments as voices. So, you know, it's funny, because a lot of people who are instrumentalists try to think about their instruments singing, I'm trying to think about, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But I'm trying,
Playing
I mean, you know, but I'm trying to think of the instrumentalists as voices, I'm sort of going the other way.
Can I ask you a real quick question about, I know you have to go pretty soon, how you feel about dancers taking your music and A, just using it and dancing to it and not telling you about it and
I
not
don't
getting
like
your
that.
permission, and B, chopping it up and using it?
Oh, well, you know, it's nice to get the permission just because then I get, you know, part of my thing is I like to see what they do with it. So, you know, I wanna be informed, and we've never like charged anybody, like, you know, I mean, if they can pay anything, it's like this token $25 or, you know, or something like that, but I like to know that it's happening, and you know, I like to also see a tape of what they did.
But you told me you have that sort of archived or something.
Yeah, we have a little
room
archive
full
of some people that have done, I'm just curious and everything, so I really do appreciate being asked permission, you know, I think it's kind of just respectful.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely.
And then the cutting up, I mean, I haven't, you know, I've never heard that yet, so. What do you think about it?
Well, it's done all the time, I don't know,
Uh-huh.
I go back and forth on the, you know, the ethical issues, something we deal with all the time, you know,
Yeah, we
dancers
do.
come up, well, I want a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, let's chop it all, let's put it together.
Collage
And
is
we
a
gladly do
good
it,
thing.
but
Mhm.
we also, you know, in the comfort of our own homes, go like,
Continue
oh
with
my
the
God, I can't believe we're doing this composer's music, and maybe they care, maybe they don't, maybe I don't care, maybe I don't know, so
Yeah.
the question's open.
We don't gladly do it, I mean, I'm fighting that all the time, I'm pissed
Oh,
off
we
by
do
that,
it.
I don't do
Collage
it.
is a
I don't
form.
always do it.
Collage
It's a
is
true,
Well-
there's a difference between the true collage and also just sort
Oh,
of.
no, I
And
know.
that therein
I
lies
know.
the.
Yeah, but come on, and most of them aren't true collages.
The level of
They're
integrity
so-
is, gotta be measured.
I mean,
I mean,
hate the
I think
idea.
another respectful thing, because I mean, certainly this is having the sampling too, respectful thing in the program is to, if they do collage it and cut it up, is to at least acknowledge who the composers are.
That's my,
Yeah.
my
Oh,
horse.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Ask
We-
anybody
that's
here.
required.
I'm on that high horse.
That's not bad.
Sure,
Yeah,
we're all
that's a
fine.
constant battle to fight.
That's a sense of
Even the
respect.
most respected artists in the field are.
Well,
doing
because,
that.
and you know what I explained to them, the tradition that modern dance came to, because the scores were originally commissioned for the pieces to just put the composer's name, because the piece was written
Yeah.
for the choreography. And once the faculty and the people and the dancers understood that's why that tradition existed, and that we can't do that because that's not what's going on, then they understood why they needed to put more musical information on a
Oh,
different
you
level.
have, I think you have to do that.
Yeah, to say
To title.
composer.
You
blah, blah,
can't
blah.
use that, I don't think that it's right to use a person's music without having.
But that was the tradition in modern dance for years, because if
They
Ruth
didn't
Lloyd
have the
wrote
names
a
in the
piece,
program?
No,
They-
the
they
name of the
put-
program, but
they
you're saying like
put-
name the music.
if you
The
did a-
piece and the music came together, and so here's a
You put
piece, who
composer.
wrote the music, who, so you didn't have to say more than that.
Yeah, but I mean, if you had, if Bach was in there, you would
Yeah.
put Bach as,
And the
as your,
title.
as your title. I think that, you know, I remember somebody telling me one time that Boozy came storming into somebody's dance performance because they were using Bartok and they hadn't gotten permission or something like that, and I think they stopped the performance. I mean, it was some kind of odd thing.
Boozy and
Well,
Hawks has
those
got
days.
a long and interesting reputation.
Yeah.
Because when you rent their scores, they're usually in the poorest condition of any rental agency, but they have the tightest control over how you use the work. If you rent a Stravinsky score, you're very likely to see everybody's old pencil marks and torn parts and things like that.
I think in their rentals, it's like that, in their publishing, they're very, you know, precise, but I guess in the rental library, they just keep their scores.
The issue also is for all of us, I mean, especially at the university setting, where is that line in terms of permission and all of that? I mean, if I have a student coming to me, actually, I have a senior right now that showed a piece that she's doing for a senior concert, and your music, I hadn't seen it yet, and one of your pieces came on, and I was absolutely delighted, you know, and I was sort of watching everybody's response to this, and I thought, oh, I don't know, they've heard this for a couple of years, you know?
Right.
There is that question, she's gonna do a performance, there's not gonna be money involved, there's not gonna be, you know, and so in my mind, I don't think, oh, I must get in touch with,
Right.
you know, I mean, if you would be
But
interested in seeing
I'd love
what
to have a videotape of it.
See,
I mean,
and that's
I
helpful,
think
that's incredibly helpful to
yeah.
me, because I wouldn't think
Yeah.
of bothering people
Right.
with that, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At UCI, every single piece of music has to be, get permission, or at least the honest attempt to get permission, and royalties paid if it's gonna be paid, if we don't. You know, and the positive thing about this is anything that's put on a concert.
Bravo.
And the positive thing that's come out of it is that it's really pushed our choreography grads and undergrads to find composers, the student composers on campus.
Sure.
So I mean, I see that as a very pleasant
It
byproduct,
is.
but it's, and I don't, and I can't put that out there as we took the high road. I put it out there as the lawyers showed up at UC Irvine and said.
Forced right.
Yeah, and,
Yeah, fine.
and so.
Get the lawyers in there and change the scene.
Yeah.
Without every single piece, if somebody wants to use
It
an
may be
expression
nice
mark,
with the
they'll be
American Bar
contacting you and
Association.
asking you.
Yes. The positive use of strange bedfellows.
We barely have the budget to costume dance.
Absolutely.
Well, so if you got
On
a
the other
choice
end
of
of Boozing
costume
Hawks,
or
I also want to say,
music,
I
what
think
would you
they're one of the
choose?
few publishing houses that are dance friendly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They
Linda
promote.
Golding is so damn.
Well,
good.
they're, yeah,
Oh,
they
yeah.
have a long
Oh,
tradition in
always,
their
they always
history.
were.
There are others and.
They have a long tradition, don't they?
Right, yeah. And even, I
They
mean,
even have
with
that
Bella,
CD.
they have taken on, I would call up with what I thought was a sort of simple little question, and it, because we used one of Aaron Copeland's pieces, his duo for flute and piano, and we had, through various and sundry ways, gotten permission from Aaron to use it, but we had to get the Boozing Hawks thing. And I was telling, I think it was Linda, that, you know, we da-da-da-da, and she said, okay, and then you could hear this scurrying around, and what she had to check on was whether or not any of the big guns had decided they were gonna do something, and had they already signed it off. And
Oh, for the Copeland year,
and then she said, can I call right back? And she did, because she called, I don't know, she said she talked to Aaron, and I'm not sure whether that was true or not, but, oh yeah, he told me that Bill and he had talked, and this was just fine. Well, okay, cool, now what, you know, and we paid our $5 every time we performed it, and that, I thought that was pretty incredible from them, because they didn't have to go,
yeah.
and they've got quite a good history of doing.
And they released that CD even of the
Right.
dance scores that they published.
Oh,
Right.
and
Yeah,
recorded.
that's great.
Yeah.
But I'd like to hear more about, you know, I'd like to hear about your experience. I mean, I think that what you're doing is so important that you know, somehow the music and dance thing, I don't see why they're even separated. I mean, I said that to Judy Matoma at UCLA, you've gotta walk a half an hour to get from the dance building to the music building. They've got the best gamelan in, you know, in the United States. It's like, gee, it's kinda weird, isn't it?
Yeah, that's weird.
That's weird.
Well, it's a,
It's personalities involved too.
Exactly.
This year, we're doing Limoges There's a Time, and we have the string orchestra is gonna play the score. And it is precisely because the conductor thought this would be a wonderful.
That must be really good. That was the word, you know, and he has all that clever words and everything, you go, that must be a really good piece. If he likes it, you better be careful.
Yeah.
Let me know when you get a real job, let me know when you
Right.
get electricity in 1882,
Right.
where you are.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly,
Well, you know,
exactly.
What Andre says, I think, though, is the harder one for us, is that the major fights, I feel, often inside the departments. And those are the harder
Inside the
ones.
department itself.
Inside the
Oh, yeah,
department
yeah,
itself,
yeah.
those are the harder ones, and
Right.
those are the more discouraging ones. Those are the ones we really get discouraged by. I wouldn't mind if I had to fight the music department, because I know those assholes, you know, but it's in the department where your colleagues.
Well, and it's because
Wow.
there's a shift now. Most of the people that grew up with you and the people, the Mark Morris type people, the people who will not separate out music and dance, they're all kind of almost retiring. So there's this whole generation of people.
Oh, no, we didn't mean it. Hold on.
Hold on, young girl. Hold on there, young woman.
Well, we're at the same age. We're at the age where we're holding on here. I gotta tell you, you know.
I mean, the thing is not so retiring, but there's always this push to be hipper and to be with the technology where the money is, and to be, you know, and the first thing to go is to kind of get rid of the live music, get rid of, you know, where can we cut corners, you know, there's so much information that people need and want, and as dancers, they're into the somatic work and the, you know, they're into all this other stuff, And unless you, I mean, here at Ohio State, I just feel so blessed because there's so many people who really will not give up with the music connection, but I know it's not true everywhere. It depends on your aesthetic. There's a real
But
split.
maybe it's so, retro that it's hip now.
Well, there's some of that.
You
You
get
know what I'm saying?
Let's cycle back.
They live long enough to come back into fashion.
Another 10 years ago.
But there's a difference between having access to music. I mean, I feel like, a lot of departments will, yes, we do need live music, it's wonderful, yes, we will encourage this to a certain extent, but I think that the difference is that you're talking about what all of us have always wanted, which is a true integration, an understanding about how these two languages should be housed together
Exactly.
without everybody having their own little empire of some kind
Right.
and their own little protectorate.
Right.
This, I don't know.
And
will
what we
never-
were talking about yesterday, and how much training can we give them, music history, can we give them rhythmic training, can we give them?
And the other thing is what you were talking about in terms of large 22-year-old, coloraturas or what have you. It's interesting for all of us. I think everyone's here certainly had the experience of getting involved, coming from a really intense conservatory background and then getting involved in dance and starting to think, that's interesting. You mean my physical body could change the way in which I approach my instrument?
Exactly.
What a concept.
And what a
Yeah.
concept, right, exactly. But look, here's another whole angle that we've been discussing, and that is, political correctness and, there's a whole other way of dealing with this that you can exploit. Which is that, the point is that the Western European tradition is the only tradition where these things
Yeah,
are separated.
absolutely. And that's happening too.
If you think about African
Sure.
performance forms, Asian performance forms, they are integrated, that there are models that exist. A master drummer can also be a master singer and a master dancer and a storyteller.
Absolutely.
Why isn't there a way in this, politically correct world that we're living in, although there's a backlash now, but I mean, still this idea that it's a multi-dimensional kind of society that we're living in, why can't that be used, as a political lever to, to demonstrate that, this is not, we have other models of what we're talking about. Why and it doesn't have to be manifest in those particular styles. In other words, the model, the template is there, but it doesn't have to sound like African music, it doesn't have to sound like Asian theater, but that's a model of, human endeavor that has to do with, basic health of the human organism, which has to do with this integration of these, perceptions. Why can't you use that? Because that's a pretty good lever, I think.
One of the things that's gone on in the last 20 years, though, is how the dance departments have been formed. And what's happened in the last 20 years is dance departments, where most of the training is, have become more academicized. And so what that means is there's been a proliferation of all kinds of things, areas in the dance department, very interesting and useful branches of dance, which take up the revenue, and music has been sort of squeezed way to a corner. The amount of offerings have been way less in music. The amount of integration has been way less, whereas, dance science and somatics and huge other areas, aesthetics and criticism, a million one, technology in the arts, and they've all taken huge pump, and each little area is there's lots of separation there in the department.
It's pathetic.
And we believe
That is so pathetic.
we believe that music
That's
should
a,
have
that's a
primacy
second
in
generation experience.
Yeah.
That's like always, that's a step away from the primary fundamental experience.
Yeah.
All these things are just like ways of putting mirror after mirror after mirror up. Do you know what I'm saying?
But
It
it's
has
also
nothing
a
to
model
do
that,
with the source, it has little to do with the source.
but it's also a model that works in academia, and it is a way for the dance departments to participate in an academic model, and it's not at all healthy for dance, but I'm a specialist in somatic science. I write articles on this field.
What is
I'm a
somatic
specialist.
science?
Everybody's throwing the word around, but
Could you tell me what it is?
I'll let Natalie do
All
it.
the alternative trainings,
Oh.
body training, yoga,
I see.
Pilates,
Okay.
Therapeutic understanding of the body,
Okay.
not necessarily involved in.
But there's been a long fight for academic validity.
Right, and that's part of the pressure
And
that
that's
works in
really
the
And
other
I think that the importance of it was key initially, but I think now we've lost the heart. We're academically valid, well, hoorah. We have tenured professors, and, you know, at the risk of having, you know, my house blown up at some point, I think UCLA dance program is the epitome of the example
Yeah.
where we had 5 tenured faculty members who built that department from zero, and they all reached that level of retirement at the same place. And because they were tenured and because there was no space for the bringing up of new voices, it sort of plateaued itself. And then as each one of these ladies either retired or were retired, there wasn't a replacement. And there hadn't been a fertile growing ground for the next voices to come up. And so now they retired or were retired, the positions were frozen or deleted, and the department was fused with
World arts and cultures.
Arts and
World arts.
cultures.
Our one member who's suffering so much from this was unable to attend, and he's.
Too bad, yeah,
And
there
now
was-
I think the department has basically disappeared.
Yeah, I knew that, I was there when that transition was gonna be happening.
And any
And they're still
number-
offering master's degrees in
They are
dance.
still offering master's degrees in dance without, you know,
Without the
Without-
roots.
well,
without
there are
the-
no dancers.
Yeah.
So
That's
there's,
tough.
you know,
Details.
Oh, Larry.
and
Just
there
gets in the
is
way.
just an enormous amount of history sitting there that's not,
Yeah, Vicky Myers, she's pretty
you know,
cool.
being cultivated in
Okay, so
way.
we come to you for wisdom. You're our mentor. Take this time now for you to give us some good recommendations about how we should approach the battle.
Well, I think one of the things that I just said is a really good way to think about it, because you do have other models that, I mean, it's a good ammunition, I think, you know, in the world that we're living in. And, you know, just.
Yeah,
I don't-
approach the ethnomusicology department, don't go to the music school. I mean, you know, that's one way.
So that's one thing, and, I mean, I wish I could be more practical, because I'm not in the struggle that you are in the academic world, which I just really have a hard time. I mean, I've never wanted to be in the academic world because of that kind of deadening battle. And yet, I feel so strongly about the next generations, and it's so important that they, you know,
Well,
what they don't know they're missing, they don't know they're missing.
Yeah, that's
We
right.
have, I mean, I just, like last year, in doing a NASA evaluation, realized that the role that these academic dance departments have in defining what dance is. I mean, because they're performers like you who are doing their thing, but how many of you are there now? I mean, with the funding gone and everything else. So these people who are coming to the university saying they want to become dancers, they want to have companies, they want to go out and dance, we're determining, because then go out and into the world and do their thing. We have tremendous
Power.
power.
Well, so I guess that would be the next thing that I would suggest, which is that, number one, I would suggest that it would start with each of you believing in yourself, you know, believing in
Which is the
yourselves
hardest thing.
and believing in what you have to give. That's number one, because any action that comes from that, you know, that sense of you know, that you are connected to a kind of a source, the more powerful it will be, even if it's quiet power or something like that. So I would say that's work on yourselves is really important. You know, primordial kind of courage. I don't mean, you know, battle necessarily, but you know what I'm saying? That those values are really important, and like, you know, in the kind of belief that it really is important to get these values to these young people. It really is. And then I think that, and then from there, I would say that the thing to really encourage in these young people is their sense of courage, their sense of curiosity, their sense of wanting to learn, their sense of always learning, that your lifetime is just, going to college is only about learning that you're going to learn for the rest of your life. It's not even what you learn, and it's just this process of curiosity, this thing, that curiosity, imagination, and, you know, this kind of a way of, you know, encouraging them to follow their own path. You know, really, because I think that young people at that time, even if they might have a lot of resistance of, you do have a lot of influence on the way their life is going to go. Encouraging them, like the teachers that they come in contact with at this point in their lives, that's going to change their whole lives. I mean, I think if I hadn't, you know, if I hadn't had the privilege of meeting Bessie and Ruth Lloyd in that time in my life, I don't know what would have become of me. I mean, I know that I wanted to create and everything, but I'm not sure I would have had the strength that I left Sarah Lawrence having a lot of, a little bit arrogant and completely illusionistic and delusionary kind of, confidence, which immediately,
But important.
but, I had the drive or something because by the time I left Sarah Lawrence, I was a seasoned performer. I was a seasoned performer, and that came from doing composition class every week, having to do a study every week for Bessie, having to, do these compositions for Ruth. It was like you were used to getting up and performing all the time, and so there was a sense of primordial confidence and then having those two people behind you in a way. I mean, I feel like those two women were, in their own way, I fought with Bessie to the death. She always won while I was still in school, but then as soon as and then my work was rebellious against her in a way, in some ways, but she still was always there till the day she died. 2 days before she died, I was on the phone, and I was supposed to be singing for Merce, for a benefit, and she said, sing, I'm not going backstage because I'm not feeling that well, but, sing beautifully, darling. That was the last thing I talked to her. So, all those years, I think that that's what you can give your students, that you believe in them and that you will be behind them, And the only thing that she, Ruth is an easier going person. She was always an easier going person. But Bessie, the only time I ever saw her really be mean to anybody was when they weren't working hard enough. When they were self-indulgent about working. That's the only time where I saw her lower the boom on somebody. But other than that, it was really like, a total positive support for your own exploration, and everybody had such different ways of doing things and came from such different backgrounds, and that was the beauty. If you saw a dance concert at Sarah Lawrence, everybody's piece was so different. If you saw the one at Bennington, everybody's piece was exactly the same. You know what I'm saying? So she really...
That's quite amazing.
Yeah, and she really had the ability to look at what was presented to her and in its own terms criticize it or, help the person create. And so I think Ruth was like that too, in its own terms.
Did you have a relationship with her after school?
I saw her from time to time, yeah, definitely. But I think that also that's another thing is that as teachers, you probably always do this anyway, you have to almost put your own sensibilities away a little bit and you have to work with what's there. It's sort of the Buddhist approach, work with what's there.
Well, you have to be willing to not, to let them be the star.
Yeah, exactly.
In some degree. And I think that's the mark of a teacher that, unfortunately, at the moment, we're a little bereft of that.
Yeah.
We have teachers with great need of being the star.
Yeah, that's very sad.
And,
that's bad teaching, that's really bad teaching.
And
That's really prevalent.
It's kind of endemic. Also, what I'm seeing is the reason kids are coming to school now is so different. They're coming to get that degree. That's the, and that's it. That's why they're there, and they're not coming because, OSU has one of the great programs in the country, blah, blah, blah. Well, I mean, they are, but.
The dancers are different. I mean, I think the dancers
let's give
still
them a
come
context, they are still.
with a little
That's
bit more passion than 90% of the rest of the university. I mean,
Well,
they know why they're here.
And I think there's some strong truth in there in the strong programs. I think one of the worst things in my grand, long history, which is huge, is seeing this eruption of dance programs across the United States and the proliferation of master's degree programs. I mean, in NASD 2 or 3 years ago, we were talking about, do we need more master's programs? I'm thinking, oh my God, we're cranking out master's students to do what? Masters of what? I mean, what are they doing? What are they doing? And we know what they're doing. They're the group who's now gone and got these positions who need to be stars who haven't because they've never done anything.
Well, it's masters of head count, a masters of money for the departments and justification to boards of trustees. This is really what I hear.
And they're very good at statistical information.
But yet, when we were at Champaign, these kids were just great. I mean, it's like there's the kids in the music department. I mean, they were so smart, so together, so interested, so interesting. I mean, I just feel like we have to just keep believing in our kids, we just have to, because I think this generation, I mean, the eighties was, I'm sorry, you go.
No, but I'm just thinking that you can't reach everybody. I'm sure that Ruth Lloyd didn't touch every person
No,
she met,
right.
but look what she touched you.
If you just get one person, like in Cleveland, it was a fantastic audience, and you know, we got a standing ovation at the end of the concert, but during the first half, I was like, there was about I heard one person, one or two people sort of having a really good time. And you know, and I thought, and you know, when I got off stage at intermission, I thought, you know, if there's just one person out there, or two people out there that, you know, like are really having a good time, that's who you're singing for. I mean, you're singing for everybody, but you know, you sort of hook in, it's a Joe Chaikin thing, find one person that you're speaking to in the audience. It turned out, of course, not of course, but it turned out the whole audience was just having a great time. But I mean, it's that same idea that you don't know who's gonna come up out of the ocean. If you get one or two dolphins, you know, in your teaching, you've done a great thing. You've changed their life, you know, and so it's this thing of, somehow as teachers, you know, and I find this myself, even teaching myself when I do my master classes or something, how do you open the door of excitement to these kids? You know, that's the whole
Passion
thing.
and curiosity.
Yeah.
Well, I think
But
maintaining our
they have
own.
the capacity, and, you know, and, you know, this is a weird thing to say, but after these events that have happened 2 weeks ago, you know, there may be a whole, you know, it's a good opportunity right now.
Absolutely.
Because these values of, I was saying in the 80s, that it was like, they didn't want to ask any questions, they were like, what's my grade, and, you know, what kind of job can I get? I mean, that was really more, because that was a time of incredible greed. But I've been feeling that these kids now, and the ones in their mid-20s, they have a different spirit, they're children of the 60s parents. And they have a different spirit, it feels like that there's a lot of love coming back in there, again, they're, you know, and wanting to do things, and what's going on in New York, a lot of alternative spaces, you know, and sharing, and there's another impulse that's possible to come up, and I think that now, something was going to happen. There was no way that this country could continue with these values of greed, of superficiality, of, you know, ridiculous values, you know, that you know, virtual everything. I mean, something had to give, and I mean, this is a horrible way that it had to give, but I think as teachers, you have a really, really good opportunity now to really question fundamental values. What is performance about? What is it about? Okay, it is like a communal experience. It's one of the only communal experiences that's alive. It's people with the possibility to fall on their faces right in front of you. You know, they're like, it's like watching a tightrope. You know, it's so vulnerable for performers. There is a figurative energy, even with people sitting in a big group of people in the audience, even if they're not running around. Also, it is this kind of alive, we give, you give, it goes like that. How many other places do you have that except for church, temple, or, you know, or meditation, you know, or meditation, you know, I mean, how many other community and communal experiences, experiential things do we have as human beings now on the planet? Not that many.
That's why people like sports.
Well, sports, I guess that's another whole thing, yeah, of course, but that's a thing of skill or something. I think that art is something else. You know, that's like the gladiators or something.
It's also a tangible end, I mean, which is also what everybody appreciates about it. We won, they won,
Yeah.
we did this. It's just statistical, even though there are these extraordinary moments of sublime achievement.
Right.
Whereas
And I think
with
people appreciate performance, I mean, if they don't even get into it emotionally, they know when someone's performing and they're doing, like a sporting event, that they're the star, and they can see the level of achievement there. But nobody wins, and you don't
Right.
go away, so it's very.
Well, that's probably what's less, partially what's
But
less.
I would say there's something
It's a
different
sense
about it.
of
I think there's
observation
something
about it.
different about it though, because I think that sports is like, you know, sheer entertainment. You know, you have this incredible high, and you know, you leave kind of hopped up, but then, you know, it basically your experience is over. But I think the thing about art that's really interesting is that 2 days later it will come up in your dreams.
Yeah.
Or, you know, it just stays with you. I mean, to me, that's what really good art is that it doesn't just end when you leave the theater, it's part of your life. And not to say that everybody has the, you know, the capacities to actually experience that, but, you know, or wants to, or, you know, but that's where the teaching comes in, that's where education comes in.
Just even, you know, talking to everybody in the room as friends, and we share anecdotes, and everybody seems to have a story about their most fond personal memory as a musician was playing in a band, something like that. And for me, I think it has a lot to do with deep connection to someone else in a way that you haven't been able to find in almost any other way.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's like a lot of the most involving experiences are at an appropriate level of skill involvement.
Yeah.
So you can challenge, but it's not easy if it's not
Conflict.
approachable. And if you can actually do that in conjunction with other people doing it at the same
Yeah.
time.
I think that's really, and it's interesting about all of us being drawn into that communal experience, because after doing the Goldbergs, at one point I was driving somewhere with my wife, and we had just done them, and then we had been very, feeling really good about my playing, and I said to her, I should do this as a solo recital again. And I was sort of driving and thinking about that, yeah, I could do this solo recital, and I remember and she was doing one of these things where I could feel her staring at me, and she turned to me and she said, why on earth would you want to do that? And I looked at her and I thought, you're absolutely right. And that was, there was that moment, when you go backwards and say, well, 1883, I can go back to that, Yeah, why would I want to do that?
Yeah, why would you?
After having this extraordinary
Exactly.
thing
I
together,
know,
you know?
exactly.
And that's why we're all here. The idea of collaboration with a dancer is what's turned us on.
Yeah.
This is just like,
It's so exciting, isn't
oh
it?
my
Yeah,
God.
it's really exciting.
It's just much more visceral than
Yeah, it's
standing in that
visceral. Visceral
practice
is
room
a-
alone.
Yeah.
Rah, 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 you know.
Visceral is a really good word.
Mhm.
Visceral is a really good word.
I mean, because when I first started playing for dance, first of all, I had no idea what I was doing, but, and I went back, and the reason I cringed is I was a flute major, and had
It's a
my-
kick-ass instrument.
And I went back and I was playing again, and my teacher said, well, what have you been doing? What do you mean? What have you been doing different lately? And I couldn't think of anything, because the dance thing didn't like,
Yeah, that's
oh, I
just
took
our
this
job.
job over at the dance department. And he said, oh, really, what are you doing? Oh, I'm playing for these dance classes. Oh. I said, well, why are you asking me? He said, well, your playing has become alive.
Wow.
And I thought, because that was, I mean, I missed it, you know.
Wow.
I missed it from that kind of objective way of,
Wow, that's-
but internally I knew what was going on, because what I was getting from it was the whole difference in the way I looked at phrasing.
Right.
Because initially I was playing flute for classes, and to be able to phrase with them,
Right.
because the body phrase is so much longer than
Right,
the music
right.
phrase, and I
Wow.
hadn't given that any thought.
Fascinating.
I was just trying to keep up, basically, and, but again, I think it's always, it always goes back to that place, who was the mentor at the time, how, when we first met, the idea of how we all got into this profession was just by, accident, mostly.
Yeah.
But somebody was there, and you kind of went,
Yeah.
and you got connected with this in a way, and when Natalie said, and you're our hero, I mean, I think that's way more true than you may want to believe, but, one of the last big pieces of yours I saw was in Paris.
Oh,
in-
did you say Atlas?
in that, new communist theater they
Oh.
just reconverted.
Recent Ruins, you mean? That was in the late 80s, right?
Yeah, 'cause-
Yeah, I remember that, with the lake in the middle, and
Because
yeah, that's a
Bell's
beautiful
company, we were
space.
in the theater.
Oh, it's a beautiful
next,
space.
you know,
That's
we were-
Nanterre.
Yes.
Nanterre.
And it was just amazing.
I have to leave.
Yeah.
I'm sure your band's gonna flip out.
Thank you.
Keep up the work, good work.
Come back again.
The Crusaders.
Thank you.
Ed Muller was the person I was thinking of. Did anybody know him? Did anyone know Ed Muller? He was a blind pianist. He used to work at a Graham School. And I remember when I first came to New York, I was teaching out in New Jersey, and he was playing. And we had such a good time, because coming from a music background, I would give all these kind of odd meters and stuff like that, and he was having so much fun. And he was such a brilliant player. He was one of the Graham School players.
How we were trying to get.
I remember him.
John Coleman.
Yeah.
How we were trying to get some of these guys while they were still on the planet in the early years. And ideas just disappeared. People don't know.
Yeah, the researching is.
Yeah, really.
Thank you, it's my pleasure, thank you so much, I hope I didn't go on.
Oh, no.
I had too much, I had too much coffee, so I totally hopped up like,
Thank you.
Thank you so
Come
much,
back
it's a
again.
pleasure, thank you very much. It's- it's-
rang a little bit.
And Natalie knows how to get a hold of me, right? You know my address, so thank you so much. I hope I get to hear what you're doing.
No, absolutely.